Welcome to the kitchen. Today I'm going to show you how to make seared beef tips with this amazing chili guajillo sauce and caramelized onions. So the first thing that we have to do is to make a classic guajillo chili sauce. The guajillo chilies are these smooth-skinned chilies that you can find in any Mexican grocery store. Of course, you pull the stem end off, then tear them open and let the seeds fall out. You don't have to be meticulous about this, and then tear them into flat pieces. I've got quite a few to go through here. Now the next step is toasting these chilies, and I'm going to do it in some fat. I'm using fresh rendered pork lard here to do that. You could use oil if you wanted to, or bacon drippings. But all of those things are perfectly good here. A couple of tablespoons go in there, and then the toasting has to be done just right to bring out the very best flavor. So what I'm going to suggest that you do is to heat the pan till it's quite hot, add the fat to it, and then put your torn flat pieces of chili in here, and just a handful at a time, and turn them. Too much toasting will create bitterness. Not enough toasting will create blandness. You'll notice that they start to turn a little lighter in color on the flesh side, on the inside, and that's what we're looking for, not too much browning. Next step is to rehydrate these toasted chilies. I'm putting hot tap water over them, and then just to keep them submerged in the water, I like to lay a heavy plate on them. We're going to let these soak for about 30 minutes to get completely soft. I've got the pan back on medium heat here. I still have enough fat to coat the bottom of it, and I'm going to put 6 cloves of peeled garlic. These are whole right now into here, and we're going to let those cook while we get the spicing. Now, a guajillo chili sauce can be made with no spices at all, or it can be fairly, as they would say in Spanish, condimentado. This one is kind of someplace in the middle. It's northern style spices that we're going to put in here, which are northern Mexican style spices, which is a half a teaspoon of cumin seeds. And I'm going to put that into my mortar here. You could use ground cumin if you want to. It's not so typical in that part of Mexico to toast the spices, but if you're used to toasting cumin, you would do that in a dry skillet until it's aromatic, and then put it into your mortar and grind that. And I'm going to scrape those now into blender jar. Boy, that smells so good. But it really smells sort of Tex-Mexy, which is one of the big differences in seasonings between traditional Mexican food and the food of Texas. I think our garlic is beginning to brown here. I'll just kind of toss it around in the pan a little bit. We've got about a teaspoon of Mexican oregano to put in here. This is the whole leaf oregano, the way you would find it in the Mexican groceries. And I'm going to rub it between my palms to crush it and release its aroma. Now, once that's in there, we will scoop out the garlic that's in here. I'm going to dry that wet spoon off a little bit there. And we'll take our garlic that is now nicely browned, put it into the blender jar. I'm going to turn the fire off underneath that pan, but we're going to come back to it in just a minute. And I'm going to put the chilies in here now. So the chilies, take my soaking plate out, and the chilies are completely soft and rehydrated now, so they'll go into the blender jar. And I'm going to put in about a cup full of their soaking liquid. Usually if you haven't over toasted your guajillo chilies, you will find that the water of soaking these guys is not terribly bitter. And so I can use a little bit of it. With some other chilies, it tends to be quite bitter. So I'm going to give this just a douse now of about a cup full of that water. And we'll set this guy back over there put the blender jar on the blender and blend it to as smooth a puree as we can get. That's really smooth, quite smooth. You'll want to do it on high for probably a couple of minutes in order to really chop finely the skins of the Guajillo chilies. They're very, very tough. Now I'm going to put my pan back over a kind of medium-high fire here, and you can see it's already hot. I'm going to use a sort of medium mesh strainer here to catch any of the skins that are not yet completely. You can hear that sizzle when it hits the pot. And now with a spatula, I will press this through. It'll also catch any seeds that you didn't get. That's why I'm not really meticulous at getting all of the seeds out of the dried chilies. But if you don't have a very fine strainer, it'll do the work. This is just a regular mesh, like what I call a medium mesh strainer, not one of the fancy chinois kind of strainers. Okay, so once I've got this through, I'm going to show you what's left in here. Even though I let that blender go for a couple of minutes, you'll notice that there's some leftovers. I'm pressing it really hard to get as much out as I possibly can, but here, that's all chili skin, and I don't want that. So I'll get rid of that over here, and we're going to stir this now until it's reduced and thick. It'll look like tomato paste almost when it's finished, and the color of it is a little bit like a tomato paste as well. So we'll stir this pretty consistently now for about, I would say it'll take about 7 or 8 minutes to get it cooked down completely. I'm going to give this a little wrap on the side here to get all the leftovers from the outside down into the pot. And we'll let this cook until it's completely thickened. It's a lot darker and really, really thick. This is the stage at which everything comes together in flavor-wise in this sauce. Now I'm going to add a couple of cups of beef broth to it. You could actually make this as a vegetarian sauce. We're making a beef dish, so I'm going to emphasize the beef flavor by putting the beef broth in it. But this is a really delicious sauce to do with grilled vegetables and such. And now I'm going to turn the temperature down to medium-low, and we're going to let that simmer for half an hour. Okay, now on to the star of this particular show, which is the beef. You can choose lots of different cuts here. I've got ribeye in front of me, but you could use filet if you wanted to. You could do sirloin. You could do a New York strip. You're just looking for something that is steak-like, and I will tell you, this dish is worth a good steak. So I'm going to cut it up. I've already started cutting this meat up into about 1-inch pieces here. And with a ribeye, you're always going to find a chunk of fat in the middle of it. You may want to keep that in or take it out. I'm going to take out a chunk of it there so that a little bits of it are on all the rest of these pieces. Now, you want to finish this dish in a really heavy skillet, a very large skillet, one that is about 12 inches across. Usually for this kind of thing, I'm cooking with you guys in a cast iron skillet, but I have another 12-inch skillet. I love heavy 12-inch skillets. And this one is made from rolled steel. Not as heavy as cast iron, but just has all those same properties. And I'm going to film the bottom of it now with some of our rich, fresh rendered pork lard that I used for making the sauce. And once we've got enough coating all over the bottom of it, we're going to salt the beef, and I like to give it a liberal amount, and we will put these pieces now into the pan in an uncrowded single layer. Uncrowded is the most important word in that sentence. If you stack them up, they'll start to sweat, and the next thing you know, you'll have stewed beef. And don't wreck this beautiful, beautiful meat by trying to crowd it all into a small pan. If you don't have a 12-inch skillet, I highly recommend that you do it in a 10-inch skillet, a regular size skillet, but do it in 2 batches. I'm gonna wash my hands here because I was working with the meat. And then we'll look at this. I wanna leave the meat undisturbed for about a minute now. And then, oh, I've got a rogue piece of beef there. And leave it undisturbed for a minute until it's really brown on one side. Then we're gonna go in and flip it all over and brown it on the other side. But it's not gonna take more than 2 minutes. I've got a medium-high fire going here and a lot of space in the skillet. Okay, all of that meat now is browned on 2 sides. I will say that it's going to be between rare and medium rare at this point. I'm going to turn the temperature way down underneath this skillet because I'm going to come back to it in just a second. We're going to do our onion. I've got a large red onion. You could use white for this. I just think the sweetness of the red onion is really delicious with this. So I'm going to cut it crosswise in a little over 1/4 inch slices here, and then put that into the pan to start browning. Then we're going to let this onion saute. This is going to be a kind of caramelization that's gone fast. So really what I'm doing is browning the onion. I don't want it to get soft like the onion for, say, a French onion soup where you want it to be caramelized and completely soft. This onion I want to be caramelized and still crunchy on the inside. That'll take about 8 minutes or so over about a medium heat. Okay, I've added about a teaspoon of salt to this. That's usually what this amount of Guajillo sauce will take. I'm going to give it a taste. Wow. It's full and rich. It's almost symphonic in its taste. It's not very spicy because we cooked that puree really well. That's one of the steps that helps to integrate all of the flavors and the heat into the sauce. If you think your sauce tastes a little bit bitter, it could be because you over toasted the chilies, or that your batch of chilies just has an extra little bit of bitterness. But you can always counteract that with a little bit of sugar. Not enough to make the sauce taste sweet, just a little bit will balance out the bitterness. Okay, so our onions are looking really good here. And I'm going to spread them out into the pan and add the beef back to the pan. With all of those little bit of juices that were there. And now we'll take our finished sauce and scrape that into the pan as well. Now that's over way too high of a heat. We need to just reheat the beef. I don't want to cook it anymore. Maybe you would want to cook it a little bit more to your desired doneness. But what I'm looking for here is just to reheat it slowly. I turned it all off and now I've turned it back onto a sort of medium low. And we'll let that just heat for a couple of minutes, just to warm the beef through. I tell you, this is one of the best dishes in all of Mexican cooking. And I think it's super beautiful just to set the skillet onto the table with those beautiful pieces of meat, that gorgeous sauce. I'm going to take a few pieces of cilantro leaves, I think, here, and just kind of scatter them over the top of this. Not so much for flavor, although I do love the flavor of it, but I think that the contrast of color is really, really beautiful. So we'll just sprinkle some of that around here. And now I'm going to say yes, the flavor, because I'm smelling that. I'm thinking of that beautiful sauce. I'm thinking of the contrast of that with the cilantro. It's just perfect. I hope you enjoy making puntas de filete al guajillo.